Okay, good afternoon, everyone. I want to kick things off. I want to give everyone a moment to kind of get onto Facebook and get all the attendees a chance to jump in. So I think we're pretty good there. So now why don't I kick things off? Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for joining us today. My name is Patrick Sullivan, and I'm the President and CEO of the Halifax Chamber of Commerce. I'd like to start by thanking our sponsors for supporting today's event and making it free for everyone to attend. Nova Scotia Power, they're leading the way for Nova Scotia's renewable energy goals. Heritage Gas, they develop and commercialize new technologies to help reduce costs and emissions. Dalhousie University Rose School of Business, their commitment to innovation at all levels of education helps keep our talent pipeline full. McGuinness Cooper, they're taking action to better the earth through land conservation partnerships, carbon balancing investments, and volunteerism. And last but not least, the Printing House, one of North America's most forest-friendly printers. So welcome everyone, but before we begin, I feel I should mention two significant and sadly heartbreaking and horrible events that have happened in the last week in Canada. First, the discovery of over 200 children's remains at a residential school in British Columbia, and most recently, the murders of 4 family members in London, Ontario. It's important we recognize that this is not part of a dark chapter in Canada's history. This is happening here and now. And we need to support our Indigenous friends and communities and stand up against hate. So please check out ISAN's resources for being an ally and fighting back against injustice and discrimination on their Instagram page and website at isans.ca. And if you know a residential school survivor or someone from the Indigenous community in need of support, please direct them to the Residential Schools Crisis Line at 1-866-925-4419. Again, 1-866-925-4419. And at this point, I think we'll all just pause for a moment to silently think about those impacted by these events. So we'll just pause for 1 minute. Thank you, everyone. Today, we're talking about renewable energy in our province. The Provincial Sustainable Development Goals Act has aggressive targets to reduce greenhouse gas emissions, promote renewable energy, improve air and water quality, and protect ecosystems. Nova Scotia has the most ambitious climate change goals in the country, including reducing greenhouse gas emissions by 53% below 2005 levels by 2030, achieving net zero emissions in Nova Scotia by 2050. Climate change impacts everyone, businesses, government, not-for-profits, individuals. We all play a part in meeting the targets that are set out. The road to renewable energy is long and winding, but Nova Scotia is already on track and has made significant progress. Today, we'll hear from experts striving to achieve Nova Scotia's goals in climate change. But before we start, I wanted to introduce Mayor Mike Savage, who will kick us off today. Mayor Savage.
Patrick, thank you very much. Thank you for those acknowledgements. I also want to acknowledge that most of us are in the land Mi'kma'ki, the unceded and traditional land of the Mi'kmaq people. It's a pleasure to be here today, and I appreciate the invitation just to say a couple of words before we go to a distinguished panel, to share a couple of words of welcome and very quickly go through some of the climate change and green priorities for the municipality. COVID has changed a lot of things, as everybody on this call will know. Many of us have become accustomed to joining Patrick and others on the Chamber-led Nova Scotia Business and Labour Economic Coalition. Last week marked the 100th meeting of that group since the pandemic began, and has been a very important venue. It tells me a couple of things. We have a business community that can pull together when the going gets tough. We have a business community that can find opportunity in the worst of adversities, a community that can indeed adapt to changing realities. In the immediate threat of COVID, it's easy to lose sight of the other existential crisis of our time, which of course is climate change. We can't afford to ignore either. Our council recognized climate change earlier than almost any other Canadian city when we declared a climate emergency in January of 2019. But out of this crisis comes opportunity as well. Here in Halifax, we're very proud of the ongoing work of Halifax, our bold climate mitigation and adaptation plan that charts our journey to net zero municipal emissions by 2030 and net zero community emissions by 2050. Ambitious targets, some of the most ambitious municipal targets around, and it requires urgent and transformational action to get us there. Decarbonizing transportation will play a big role, and HRM has a target to electrify our buses and ferries well in advance of 2030. New investments in key sectors like building and transportation will not only result in deep emissions reductions, but importantly, generate employment and stimulate new and existing business. And that's critical because Halifax is as much a climate action plan as it is an economic development plan. Key to continuing the growth of our economy while building a more resilient and a healthier future. We're taking action in other ways. Work on a community-wide electric vehicle strategy is well underway. A successful and expanded Solar City program and completed LED retrofit of the municipality's more than 40,000 streetlights. But the success of Halifax, and I want to acknowledge Shannon Miedema, our staff lead on this, will ultimately depend on our collective efforts. We need everybody. Academic institutions, I always think of NSCC and Don Bureau mentioning to us that they were designated the greenest college in North America. Each of our academic institutions, business leaders, organizations, communities, and citizens need to come together to take action on this. And of course, some are doing tremendous work, demonstrating climate leadership and harnessing the benefits that come with that leadership. Carbon Cure, based out of Dartmouth, won this prestigious $7.45 million US COSIA Carbon X Prize to continue their work to reduce the amount of carbon dioxide generated during the production of concrete. That's amazing, but that's just one example of the kind of green innovative business that is helping us chart the course to a net zero future. So I encourage you, as you are, to think about how you can seize opportunities to be early adopters to best practices, to be innovators. Know that Halifax is indeed open for business, ready for big ideas, and prepared to lead. Across the country and around the world, smart cities are demonstrating that they can move beyond the traditional role of being environmental stewards for water, solid waste management, and public transit to being leaders. Indeed, new approaches to renewable energy are vital to the future success of any city that wants to thrive. Because cities can and should be environmental innovators. The impacts of climate change and natural disasters, as well as the repercussions of poorly designed climate policies, stand to have dire impacts in urban centers. We know these impacts would disproportionately fall on lower income households and traditionally marginalized communities. Municipalities influence so many of the emissions in Canada, meaning we have an imperative to act if we're to meet local, provincial, and national climate change goals and continue to build strong, resilient communities. Early this morning, I joined a call of mayors of G7 countries meeting in advance of the upcoming G7 meeting in the UK, as well as COP26 in Glasgow, hosted by Core Cities UK and Commonwealth cities, G7 cities, talking about sustainable and fair growth as the only way out of COVID and towards the kind of future we all want to see. So I very much thank you, Patrick, and the Chamber. Look forward to the panel. Scott will be hosted by Scott Skinner, who many of you know has a lifetime of climate action, a man whose career peaked last fall when he appeared on my podcast, Open Mic, which is now called Mic Drop. And I'm hoping that, I think Peter Gregg is going to be joining me on one of them as well as Jennifer Tuck and Derek Estabrook. So thank you very much for this opportunity. Thank you for putting it on. Thank you for joining us. And let's go green together. Thank you very much. Walaaliuk.
Thank you very much, Mayor Savage. Great comments, and pleased to know that you will be the new chair of the Big City Mayors across Canada, and I'm sure you'll be explaining to them what Halifax is and how they should all take a look at that plan and reflect it in their own plans in their own city. So thank you. It's now my pleasure to welcome our moderator, Scott Skinner. It's a bit surprised to hear the mayor say that his career peaked last year with the podcast, but I'm hoping today is the day that it peaks. Scott has been the president and CEO of the Clean Foundation for the past 5 years. Scott works with their many partners to support the fair transition to the clean, low-carbon economy through a number of key impact areas, including the reduction of energy poverty, support for undeserved communities, protection for the natural environment, action on climate change mitigation and adaptation, and by contributing to the clean economy labor force. Welcome, Scott, and over to you.
Thanks, Patrick. I will make one note. We try to support underserved communities, not undeserved communities. Easy to trip up on that one for sure.
Thank you.
You wait till I introduce Peter and through his profile. I'll be tripping over all kinds of words. But thank you so much for the invite to be here today at this important time. I think it's great. We have an awesome lineup of panelists, and I hope some really great questions that come out later from the attendees. This has been a really interesting year for all of us. And I think on the issue of climate, we're hopeful that some of the ability to find change quickly can be transferred to the issues of climate change and renewable energy. So I will say before I start that, we're at an interesting moment in Nova Scotia as we work to sort of define what happens alongside of the Sustainable Development Goals Act and climate change policy. And at the moment, the public engagement is now open. So it's really important that all of the voices from across Nova Scotia take the time to contribute their thoughts, not just the experts, but it's important to hear from everyone, because I think the things that we will be defining will impact them over the next decade. So when I get a second, I'm going to put a link up in the chat, and I encourage everybody to take a look and engage in that process. But moving ahead now, I'm going to introduce our wonderful panelists one by one, and then I'm going to set them up for their presentations. So here we go, and wish me luck with Peter's. Peter Gregg is President and CEO of Nova Scotia Power, a role he assumed in October 2020. In his role, Peter focused on planning for Nova Scotia's clean energy future while overseeing the delivery of safe, reliable electricity to customers across the province. Peter is an experienced leader in the energy sector. Prior to his role at Nova Scotia Power, Peter most recently served as the president and CEO of the Independent Electricity System Operator, IESO, where he oversaw the operation of Ontario's bulk electricity system. He was also the president and CEO of EnerSource from 2014 to 2016, where he was an integral part in the merger of 4 of Ontario's largest local distribution companies to create Electra, the second largest municipality-owned utility in North America. This is the hard part. Peter currently serves on the Member Representatives Committee of North American Electric Reliability Corporation, and is a member of the Electricity Subsector Coordinating Council. He is also a member of the Canadian Electricity Association Board of Directors. Safe to say that Peter knows a lot about electricity, and new to Nova Scotia, so big warm welcome to a wonderful Nova Scotia summer, hopefully. Next up, we have Jennifer Tuck. Jennifer is the CEO of the Maritimes Energy Association. She joined the association in September 2019 after spending almost a decade working for Nexera Energy Canada, and that's a subsidiary of Nexera Energy Resources LLC, a leading North American energy company, as its Director of Regulatory Affairs and Government Relations. And I think Jennifer and Peter have crossed paths in those roles back in the day. Prior to joining Nexera, Jennifer spent a decade working in the Ontario government as a political aide to several cabinet ministers, including working for several ministers of energy. And we have Derek Esterbrooks, and he's the Vice President of Development for Heritage, or Business Development for Heritage Gas, and that's our natural gas distribution utility. Derek is developing, his team are developing and commercializing new technologies to help reduce energy costs and GHG emissions in Nova Scotia, including hydrogen, renewable natural gas, energy efficiency building HVAC systems, and combined heat and power. Prior to joining Heritage Gas, Derek worked for about 15 years in sales, marketing, product innovation, and business development roles in the food and beverage industry. So welcome, everybody. So I'm going to get Peter set up first for his presentation, and we asked him to comment on this sort of these following words. So Premier Rankin, recently made commitments for the province to be off coal and reach 80% renewables by 2030 as part of his focus on the 3 E's: environment, economy, and equity. Nova Scotia Power has a big role to play in making this a reality. Can you paint us a picture of how Nova Scotia Power will build on decarbonization successes to date to drive towards these 2030 goals and set us on a path to net zero by 2050? What are some examples of innovative partnerships and collaborations that will create opportunities in the province that align with the Premier's 3 E's?
Okay, thank you, Scott, for that kind introduction. I've got to obviously make my bio more user-friendly in the future, so thanks for getting through that. Thanks also to Patrick for hosting the event and the chamber, but also to the mayor for those opening words as well. And thanks also to my fellow panelists who've joined me here today. I feel like I've done a number of speaking engagements over the past several weeks and months since, as Scott said, I joined Nova Scotia Power last fall. And I'm doing that because I believe that these kinds of opportunities for dialogue, discussion and collaboration are really important as we move forward together in the transition to cleaner energy. So let me get to answering your question, Scott, to paint that full picture that you mentioned. But as I do that, I think I'll first start by setting the scene, and that's a scene that is, includes Nova Scotia Power, but obviously is much larger than us as well. And so, our customers have really been telling us, and frankly, I think all Nova Scotians and Canadians are saying the same thing, that they want for the future a cleaner, greener electricity system for themselves, for their families, for their communities. Our customers are telling us they want that same cleaner energy future and expect us as a company to do our part. And we are listening as they tell us that. As well, both the provincial and federal governments have ambitious climate plans, as does HRM, which the mayor just highlighted with Halifax. And we share at Nova Scotia Power these governments' visions around climate change action. So we are working towards the transition away from coal in Nova Scotia to that greener energy future, which includes a plan to advance the closure of our coal plants by 2030. And that includes an integration of new technologies and working with regional utility partners and governments on projects like the Atlantic Loop to connect Atlantic Canada to clean power sources in other parts of Canada. It's an ambitious plan, but along with that ambition, it must be done in a way that is affordable, that is equitable, and is certainly reliable for our customers. And Scott, you mentioned the 80% renewable by 2030 target that has been set out by the province, as well as the goal to move away from coal. And as I mentioned, we're aligned to those goals. And so decarbonization is central to our corporate strategy at Nova Scotia Power. And in fact, we've been transitioning to clean energy for over 15 years now. And I think it's safe to say that Nova Scotia Power has become a demonstrated national leader in greenhouse gas emission reductions. We've reduced our coal use by 33%, Since 2005, we reduced carbon emissions by 34%, exceeding the original national goal there. And over the last decade, we've tripled our renewable energy output from 9% to 30%, and we are on track to supply approximately 60% of our electricity from carbon-free resources in 2022, once the Nova Scotia block of energy starts to flow across the Maritime link. We are also the second highest wind penetration in Canada after PEI is right here in Nova Scotia. As we continue to move forward, our focus will continue to be on reducing our carbon emissions while we integrate those new technologies, are innovating and providing green energy solutions to meet the energy needs of our customers. And the mayor mentioned this too, that this transition will create new green jobs and economic opportunities for our province. And it's all flows from a commitment that our customers began to make. They've really contributed $5 billion in the last 15 years or so. It allows us to add sources of clean, low carbon energy to our system as we modernize the grid, both for today and for tomorrow. And we continue to advance our decarbonization strategy and looking at how we might be able to accelerate it. But as I said, the next steps must continue to be affordable for our customers. So in painting the picture, that's sort of the background of the canvas, and I'll add a little more color to it. I feel a bit like Bob Ross as I say that. Hopefully you get the reference. And while we're pleased at how far we've come, there are also external factors that effectively are accelerating our transition off coal. So I mentioned our 2030 plans to advance our off coal by that date from our originally planned date of 2040. So what's driving this? In addition to the new provincial goals earlier this year, the federal government announced more aggressive greenhouse gas reduction targets on the path to net zero by 2050, which includes increasing their targets from 30% below 2005 levels, which I mentioned we've already achieved or exceeded a bit, and that'll increase to 40 to 45% below 2005 levels by 2050. Now, there's no doubt this is prompted or in coordination with the US announcing their target of 50% below 2005 levels. And I'm pleased to say, in addition to already achieving that 35% reduction from our emissions levels in 2005, we're also on track to achieve Canada's new 2030 target well before 2025. Other piece of the puzzle is there's also an announcement from our parent company, Emera, in February this year. They made their climate commitment. The key aspects of that is an 80% reduction in the use of coal by 2023, a reduction of carbon emissions by 55% from 2005 levels, and also set a vision of net zero by 2050 for the entire Emera family of companies. There was also a recent study by Narrative Research that showed 3/4 of Nova Scotians indicate they support the phasing out of coal by 2030. Data like this is reinforcement for everyone that this does need to happen. So altogether, these factors are creating an increased urgency for us to accelerate our timeline for that transition. So it begs the question, what does that future look like? What does the full picture look like? First and foremost, I want to say there's certainly a human element to this transition. Coal has played an important part in Nova Scotia's history, but we all know that it doesn't play a part in the future. And so as we transition away from coal, we're committed to our employees and to the communities we serve and to supporting them through this transition. It's a really important piece of this. So we'll work with our government in ways to leverage new opportunities for those employees and communities that will be emerging as the transition develops. And while we don't have all of the fine details ironed out, what we do know is that once we start receiving the Nova Scotia block of energy on that Maritime link, it will allow us to close one coal unit at Lingan Generating Station that we've been working toward with our team in Cape Breton for some time. As I mentioned, we don't have all of the details of how each piece of the off-coal journey is not all ironed out yet, but we're actively building that plan for the closure of the remaining units. Much work to be done to determine what makes the most sense economically and to ensure continued reliable and affordable service to our customers. We're also working closely with provincial government on these plans and are actively engaged with the federal government and neighboring provinces and utilities on a regional solution. I mentioned previously the concept of the Atlantic Loop. So there's a lot of moving parts, a lot of complexity to this journey to 2030, and that feels some days that time is approaching fast, but I'm confident that we together can achieve that. Another significant part of the transition relies on the innovations that you're starting to see across our region and the groundwork that's been laid for electrification in Nova Scotia. We're modernizing our grid, switching to smart meters across the province, which will give customers more convenience, reliability, and control, and also give us improved operational flexibility. There's the Smart Grid Nova Scotia project, looking at how to safely and effectively integrate solar, battery storage, and electric vehicles onto the grid and learn how they can benefit all consumers. We have a successful pilot called the Intelligent Feeder Project, where we installed residential batteries and a grid-sized battery at a local substation in Elmsdale. And with the support from government and associated rebates, electric vehicles are coming closer and closer to being within reach for the average Nova Scotian. And we're actively working with partners. You heard the mayor mention their ambitions, working with partners in the installation of charging stations across the province to help get that infrastructure in place to make this even more of a reality. Opportunities with microgrids is another emerging area. With this technology, homeowners would have 4 levels of energy assurance from renewable generation, local battery storage, supplemented by community generation and a seamless connection back to the local grid. So, it's exciting. It's certainly motivating to see the groundwork being laid for the transition to a green economy. But the future of energy in our province and that full picture will depend on all of us working together to collaborate, to innovate, and to take action collectively. And to give you some of the examples of the work and collaboration that are currently in the picture, some exciting examples that are happening right here in Halifax. We're working closely with Mayor Savage, CAO Jacques Dubé, and their entire team on exciting initiatives. The mayor mentioned Halifax 2050. And it includes the development of a data analysis tool designed by a local company called Simtech. The tool is designed to prioritize and expedite building energy retrofits. It's early days, but we see a lot of promise in this, and really pleased with our collaboration on that. There's also the development of the Cogswell District and the electrification of Halifax Transit's bus fleet, which the mayor mentioned. On transit, our work to date has focused on ensuring we have the infrastructure in place to support the extra load that will result as the city electrifies its transit fleet. We're also working with the town of Bridgewater, which is recognized nationally, winning Canada's Smart Cities Challenge. It's working to become a smart community where every energy service, all those services are clean, efficient, available, and affordable to everyone. And we've been working with the town for the past 4 years through its Energized Bridgewater program with a goal to developing a model that can be used in other municipalities across Canada. And it's important to mention agreements we've got with Mi'kmaq communities in the Assembly of Nova Scotia Mi'kmaq Chiefs. We're promoting training and employment and providing opportunity for communities to build capacity and then therefore be able to meaningfully participate in our projects. Nova Scotia Power and the Clean Foundation with Scott signed MOUs with Glooscap and Pictou Landing First Nation to develop a community clean energy program. The focus is on strengthening residential energy efficiency, providing education and building capacity, as I mentioned, among local contractors and staff, and engaging and educating community members about energy efficiency and providing retrofits. We also have our ongoing partnership with Efficiency One to promote energy efficiency for our customers and the products that they use every day. This includes working together along with the province on the home warning program to provide free home energy assessments and upgrades to our customers on a low income. As a result, as of this past week, you may have seen our announcement in partnership with Nova Scotia-based Natural Forces Solar and the town of Amherst to build our first ever community solar garden. As part of our Smart Grid Nova Scotia program, it will produce enough energy to power approximately 240 homes every year. It's important to us as an organization to collaborate with the communities we work and live in. We know that we can play a key role as a partner in helping facilitate speed and design and construction to support growth. And as a utility, we see ourselves as an enabler and as an accelerator to that green economy. With the achievement of net zero by 2050, it will get us to a place where we are truly powering a green Nova Scotia. But we need to work together, as I mentioned, and innovate together if we are going to get there. The economic benefits for the province and for local businesses, large and small, are real, especially as we emerge from the pandemic. Internally, we're actively working on ways to make it easier to collaborate and engage with us. We're working to introduce a portal later in 2021 to provide companies the ability to proactively express interest in working with Nova Scotia Power, and to provide some company information so that we can expand our database for future targeted requests for proposals. The most important criteria to engage with us is being strong in health and safety focused culture, and demonstrate a track record of working safety is first and foremost. Our commercial and customer solutions team have been overseeing and collaborating with our partners on projects across the province. As an example, we work with more than 100 certified businesses across the province to promote technologies that not only lower greenhouse gas emissions, but enable substantial cost savings for our customers, such as the adoption of heat pumps, which have come in handy in the last several days. To connect with our team, I encourage you to reach out to us via the Clean Energy Future email on the screen. Yeah, you can see it there. That mailbox is monitored by multiple teams in the company, and they'll connect you with the right team members in our business. So I'll wrap it up by asking you to all think about, what's your part? How do we work together and collaborate to make our shared vision for the future of energy a reality? It's an exciting time. It really feels like the momentum is building, and we're already starting to see transformative changes taking shape. And I think, Scott, I will end it there for now. Thank you again to everyone for being here and for listening. And I appreciate the opportunity, and I look forward to the Q&A session.
Thanks so much, Peter. And on that note about the Q&A, I see already in the Q&A and chat, there's a couple questions. You feel free to put them in there. We'll try to get to them if we can later, depending on the time. That's good practice. Okay, so Derek is up next. So question for Derek was, the Government of Canada and Nova Scotia have set ambitious climate targets that will require our province to quickly transition to a low carbon economy. How can Heritage Gas aid in this transition? How does Heritage Gas's natural gas infrastructure enable the adoption of hydrogen as a local energy source? And looking ahead to 2030 and beyond, where do you see the role of green hydrogen specifically in a lower carbon energy system for Nova Scotia?
Thanks, Scott. Lots of big questions there. So first, I'm going to start with a pessimistic view, and I promise to end on an optimistic note. The description of this panel states that the road to renewable energy is long and winding, and I agree with that. But the description also states that Nova Scotia is already on track, and unfortunately, we're really not on track. To get to net zero, we'll need to transform our entire energy system and transition to a low carbon economy. And we may be on track to producing 80% of our electricity from renewable sources, but electricity is just one part of our complex energy system. To reduce our emissions to net zero, we'll need all levels of government and businesses, utilities like Nova Scotia Power and Heritage Gas, and every Nova Scotian to not just do their part, but to really work together in a very coordinated way. Because getting to net zero in Nova Scotia is going to be extremely challenging. And these next two charts that illustrate why. So to achieve net zero emissions by 2050, Nova Scotia must reduce our total energy use from 169 petajoules today through measures like energy efficiency and conservation. We're going to need to green the 25% of our energy demand that's currently met with electricity. And we're going to need to clean the 75% of our energy demand that's currently met with refined petroleum products like natural gas and propane and biofuels. We are also going to have to decarbonize sectors that will be difficult to electrify, like heavy transportation and industrial processes that account for almost 40% of our energy use. So while greening the electric grid and meeting more of our end use demands with renewable electricity will be important, more electrification simply won't be enough. To get to net zero, we'll need a massive amount of renewable energy to replace fossil fuels that today, as you can see, meet over 3/4 of our energy needs. And in addition to green electricity, we're going to need other types of renewable energy that can be produced at large scale, stored for weeks or months to meet our peak energy needs in the winter, and used in all the diverse ways that fossil fuels are used today. And we think that a low carbon gas grid will play an important role to produce and store and distribute some of these other forms of renewable energy. And let me show you how. So these wires carry energy in the form of electrons, and the energy that these wires carry can be made from fossil fuels like coal or oil, by natural gas, or they could be made from renewable energy like wind or hydro or solar. And regardless of the fuel used to produce the electrons, all electrons are the same, and the wires that carry them are the same. And so the infrastructure that carries these electrons was important in the past, it's important today, and this electric infrastructure will be important in the future as well. And so we view the gas distribution system in a similar way. Wires carry electrons and pipes carry molecules. So today's gas grid distributes fossil natural gas. However, the emissions intensity of the gas grid can be reduced by displacing some natural gas with renewable natural gas and by blending green hydrogen into the gas grid. And this combination of renewable natural gas and hydrogen blending could reduce the emissions intensity of the gas grid by up to 1/3 over the next 10 to 15 years. And our vision is that by 2050, the gas grid can be converted to a 100% clean hydrogen grid so that we can use this gas infrastructure that we have today to deliver the clean energy that we will need tomorrow. And we can see a future with both a cleaner electric grid and a cleaner gas grid. And we see building a new energy system that links our electric and gas grids together to build a much more flexible and resilient net energy system. And this, the work we have done shows that this linking of a cleaner electric grid with a cleaner gas grid is a better way forward to net zero. And it's a more integrated energy system that offers complementary benefits that makes it more feasible for us to get to net zero and to do it at lower total cost. So let me just give you an illustration of how a cleaner electric grid working with a cleaner gas grid can help to reduce our emissions. So in Nova Scotia today, almost half of our buildings are heated by oil. To achieve our emission reduction goals, we'll need to get buildings off oil. And why do we need to do this? Because an average oil heated home in Nova Scotia emits as much CO2 as 3.5 gasoline powered cars. And with 150,000 oil heated homes in the province, these homes are emitting almost as much CO2 as all 600,000 passenger vehicles driving on Nova Scotia's roads today. But if we can switch these homes from oil to either natural gas or to heat pumps, that's equivalent to converting 2.5 cars from gasoline to electric vehicles. So it can really make a big impact. And an even better option may be homes that use hybrid heating systems that reduce energy consumption and emissions by heating with an electric heat pump at moderate outdoor temperatures and when electricity demand is low, and then in cold temperatures when it's more expensive to heat with the heat pump, and when energy demand is high, a smart control switches the system to a natural gas furnace or boiler. Hydro-Quebec and Énergir, Quebec's natural gas utility, have determined that hybrid heating systems offer the most feasible and lowest cost way to decarbonize building heat in Quebec by managing peak energy demand in the winter. Peak energy demand is also a significant challenge in Nova Scotia because on the natural gas system, for example, natural gas demand in the summer is about 50 megawatts, but the average daily demand in the winter is 6 to 7 times higher than that. So our future clean energy system is going to need to address the reality that Nova Scotia uses a lot more energy in the winter than we do in the summer. And we're going to have a system that can meet our peak demand on these coldest winter days. And again, that's an area where hybrid heating systems can offer a practical solution. I mentioned that in addition to renewable electricity, we'll also need other types of renewable energy to get to net zero. And there's growing consensus that green hydrogen produced from renewable electricity will be the ideal type of renewable energy to complement electricity. This green hydrogen can be produced through a process called electrolysis that uses renewable electricity to split water molecules into hydrogen and oxygen. And the hydrogen can be stored for weeks or months, which makes it an excellent complement to lithium-ion batteries that address short-term energy storage needs. In this way, green hydrogen production can actually enable us to put even more wind generation onto Nova Scotia's electrical grid. And you can just see, so this is the type of system that can produce green hydrogen. You see some wind turbines in the background. The electrolyzer is here in the front, and then the electricity is stored. So these types of systems are being built today. The hydrogen strategy for Canada, which was released by the federal government in late 2020, set the development of clean hydrogen as a strategic priority for Canada. And last fall, the Offshore Energy Research Association released a feasibility study on the potential for hydrogen in the Maritimes, and it determined that hydrogen can play a big role in sectors like heavy transportation, heat for industry and buildings, power generation, and low carbon fuel. So I'd like to end by showing you how the natural gas infrastructure in Nova Scotia can enable the use of hydrogen as a local source of renewable energy, and also why we believe that Nova Scotia should take an early leadership role in the development of hydrogen. So in the gas networks in the United Kingdom are working on a project called H21, which is a plan to convert the gas networks in the north of England to hydrogen starting in 2028. And the city of Leeds is proposed to be the first city in the UK to be converted from natural gas to hydrogen. And it's a really interesting case study for us in Nova Scotia. The city of Leeds is a moderate-sized northern city, like here in Nova Scotia. Their energy demand peaks in the cold of winter, and their natural gas distribution system is very similar to Nova Scotia's in one critically important way. And that way is pipes, and specifically plastic pipes. Typically, hydrogen has to be transported and distributed through plastic pipes, while older gas distribution systems in Europe and much of North America still use some steel or iron pipes. Leeds is in the process right now of modernizing its natural gas grid by replacing all their old iron pipes with plastic. But here in Halifax, because the natural gas grid is less than 20 years old, our system has mostly been built with plastic pipes. So we already have one of the most hydrogen-ready gas distribution systems in all of North America, which really makes hydrogen an ideal location to lead, makes Halifax an ideal location to lead the early development of hydrogen. So we're doing a lot of this work, work in this area now. An Atlantic hydrogen feasibility working group is getting ready to kick off in the next month or so, and we're really going to start working on the development and deployment of hydrogen, not just here in Halifax and in Nova Scotia, but across Atlantic Canada as well. So I will end there, and I'm really looking forward to the rest of the panel discussion.
Thanks, Derek. That was great. And I'd just like to note before Jennifer gets started, like it is patently unfair to ask these panelists to answer these questions in 8 to 10 minutes. These are complex issues. You know, I can tell by the questions that are coming in right now that there's a lot of interest, but you know, great job so far, gentlemen. For Jennifer, her question was, the energy sector of the Maritimes needs to adapt rapidly to a rapidly changing landscape that requires deep emission reductions this decade. What role does the Maritimes Energy Association play as we pursue those emission reductions and clean growth pathways? And what have you seen from your diverse membership that makes you optimistic that we can reach the 2030 and 2050 goals while creating jobs in the region? Still on mute, Jennifer.
The most often said phrase of 2020 and 2021. Thank you, Scott and Patrick and the staff at the Halifax Chamber of Commerce for having me today. I appreciate the opportunity to speak. I do have to note, though, that I've got a tough act to follow. Both the presentations from Peter and Derek were amazing. Mine is going to be a bit shorter and fewer slides, but please bear with me. So, oops. I seem to have a touchy mouse that doesn't want to show my first slide. There we go. So just for a bit of background on the association, for those of you that might not be familiar. The Maritime Energy Association is a tireless advocate for the future of the energy sector in the Maritimes. It was first established back in 1982 to represent the business interests of Nova Scotia companies in the burgeoning offshore oil and gas industry. However, as the years went on, the association adopted a broader mandate to include other energy sources and expanded and made it more of a regional association to include representation from both New Brunswick and PEI. This necessitated a name change, so it became the Maritimes Energy Association in approximately 2011. The association currently has about 170 member companies, 3 full-time staff, a volunteer board of directors, and an immediate past chair. And you can see some, for those of you who've attended some of our events, you'll recognize the graphic on the bottom. It's a common one that we use, and these, with the exception of the gas pipeline, which is a stock image, all of the rest of these projects are from facilities in Atlantic Canada. So there's the Gluescap solar on top of a gas station, I believe, Machaquack Dam in New Brunswick, the LED roadway lighting on a Confederation Bridge. And this is terrible. I should know where the wind farm is, but I don't. It's a Nova Scotia wind farm. I apologize for not knowing the exact one. The 3 pillars of the Maritimes Energy Association and how we, unlike Nova Scotia Power and Heritage Gas, we don't have a direct connection to reducing emissions, but we do work with our members who all have a role to play. Our promise to our members is that we'll be tireless advocates for the future of the sector in the Maritimes, and we do that through connecting, educating, and advocating. Like the energy sector in Atlantic Canada, the MEA is also in transition. As I mentioned, for most of our 40-year history, we focused on the growing offshore oil and gas industry when we were the Offshore Technologies Association of Nova Scotia. Like many of our members and sector participants, we realized a need to diversify our mandate and our membership in order to stay relevant. And that's when we changed our name and also expanded our reach into New Brunswick and PEI. This experience gives us as an association a unique perspective into what our members are facing as the energy sector transitions to a net zero future. When we connect people, we connect them not only to each other through membership or through networking events, but we also make sure that they have contact with policymakers, politicians, regulators, and other stakeholders to discuss the impacts of net zero policies on their business. We connect them to other markets also as well to export their skills and talents and products, both domestically and internationally. And the lessons our members learn here can be applied in other jurisdictions as the focus on climate change isn't just an Atlantic Canadian phenomenon. We also strive to provide our members with opportunities to learn from each other and industry experts. We do this through webinars like the one we're doing now, ones that we host ourselves, as well as our annual conference, which I have to note that the last 16 months has been challenging for the association, as one of our key focuses is connection. And it's been difficult to connect over the last 16 months thanks to COVID. We have strived virtually, but we look forward to being able to hold more in-person events in hopefully late 2021, but definitely by 2022, so that we can have some of these conversations in person and not just through Zoom. We also offer a daily newsletter that curates news articles specific to the energy sector regionally, nationally, and internationally, so that information is available on what other jurisdictions are doing and to meet emission reduction targets and battle climate change. We also act as a resource for the public to get factual information on the energy sector, policies, and programs. Our final pillar is Advocation Advocate. We are advocates for our members in all aspects of the energy sector. This is particularly applicable these days in Nova Scotia, as the government's rolled out several programs to incent renewable development, including the Green Choice Program and the Shared Solar Program. We've been working with our members to ensure that policymakers are aware of their views on the development and implementation of these programs. This feedback is important to government, as industry participation is imperative to the success of these programs. Government is good at a lot of things, but they don't often have the business experience or sector knowledge that is necessary when creating programs like these. So it's important for our members to be engaged and to be reaching out to the government to let them know how they feel. And then in conclusion, I think the third part of my question is, what am I seeing that makes me confident or optimistic about the future of net zero in Nova Scotia? And I think all the things that both Peter and Derek have touched on are part of that. What Nova Scotia Power is doing to phase out coal 10 years in advance of their previous target is amazing. We certainly support them in their efforts to do that. I'm also encouraged by the number of programs that there now are available to incent more renewable development in the province, including the previously mentioned Green Choice Program, the Shared Solar Program. I'm also encouraged by all the work that municipalities are doing. Mayor Savage mentioned Halifax. I believe I saw a news release this week that talked about Halifax committing to 75 gigawatt hours, I think that's right, of procurement out of the Green Choice Program to meet their renewable needs. Premier Rankin, just in his short time in office, has made some major commitments to renewable energy. First, the 80% renewable target by 2030, and then also the commitment to phase out coal that I previously mentioned. I'm really excited about the Green Choice Program in that it gives large loads the option to exercise some of their ESG goals and purchase power from renewable sources. And it's nice also that the government has created the Shared Solar Program to allow community members who may not have the opportunity to put solar panels on their own roofs to buy into community solar gardens and the like. So I look forward to seeing the details of both those programs as they roll out. And I look forward to helping our members navigate them so that they're able to take advantage of the opportunities presented by these programs in Nova Scotia. I'm also, prior, as you heard in my introduction, I spent 10 years in the renewable sector, predominantly working on wind, solar, and energy storage projects. And I didn't have much exposure to hydrogen until I came to the MEA in late 2019. And the buzz around hydrogen in the last year and a half has been astounding to me. And I'm encouraged by all the work that Heritage Gas is doing on hydrogen. I do think it's an exciting opportunity for Nova Scotia, particularly given the strong wind resource that's available here. The ability to turn that into green hydrogen and utilize the natural gas distribution system that's already in place makes a lot of sense. And I'm really excited to see where that project goes. So for all those reasons, I'm very optimistic about where Nova Scotia is headed. I do agree that there's, with both Peter and Derek, there's been a lot done, but there's a lot that remains to be done. But given the momentum that we have here, I think, I believe that Nova Scotia will definitely meet its target of net zero by 2050.
Thanks, Jennifer. That's great. We had some questions prepared to ask you guys, and I'm looking at the time, and I really want to get to some of the questions from the panelists. So out of that list that you guys saw, I'm going to pick one. I'm going to ask all three of you to comment on it, and then when we're done that, I'll start to pick through the attendee questions. Is that cool? Okay, so here we go. It's no secret that the pandemic has shown us that there are massive inequities in our economy. Traditionally marginalized people have faced the brunt of the impact on the economic downturn. You've each painted a future of opportunity for Nova Scotia, but I'm curious to how your organizations and its partners will ensure that these opportunities benefit all Nova Scotians, including women, newcomers, African Nova Scotians, and Indigenous peoples. So I'll throw that to you first, Peter, then Derek, then Jennifer.
Yeah, thanks, Scott. Yeah, an important question, really. And you heard me mention affordability and equity in my remarks, and I think that's central to our strategy. It really has to be. So as we think about it in Nova Scotia Power for the transition, to be able to do this affordably, this transition off coal, quite frankly, we need assistance with that. I mentioned that Nova Scotian customers have paid $5 billion in the last 16 or so years for the transition so far. But we're 3% of the national population, and over 50% of the cost of transitioning off coal is going to exist here. And so, quite frankly, we need some government support on that. And we're actively engaged in dealing with the federal government, looking for that support to make it affordable for all Nova Scotians. So that's a huge piece of focus for us. Around equity, I think the other thing that we've observed is that this transition to more renewable sources sometimes isn't the most equitable transition. And I think of solar as an example. If you live in an apartment building, how are you going to put solar panels on your roof? And that's one of the reasons we invested. You may have seen an announcement come out earlier this week on a community solar garden in Amherst as part of our smart grid project. But rather than needing to have a roof to put your solar panels on, this is a community-based project, which it connects right into the grid, and so that it means everyone in that community can benefit from that additional renewable energy directly on the grid.
I'll just pick up on that. I think historically the energy industry has been very centralized, whether it's electricity, oil and gas, and Nova Scotia historically has been a big importer of energy. And one of the big opportunities around the energy transition is the opportunity to produce our energy in a much more distributed fashion in communities all around the province. And I think this does create tremendous opportunities for Indigenous peoples and others. So we can kind of spread these opportunities around the province. It's also, we're at this pivotal time of transformation where I think the energy industry historically has not been overly diverse. It's been very male dominated. And if we make a conscious decision now to say that the future energy system that we're going to build will not look like the energy system that we're leaving behind. But I think it really does need to be a conscious decision that all of the players make.
I just want to add a bit to what Derek was saying on the diversity piece. Certainly, in my time in the energy sector, I've certainly experienced the overwhelming male makeup of the sector. And it's just last week, we actually hosted a webinar with Deborah Yedlin, the Chancellor of the University of Calgary, and a journalist who writes quite a bit about diversity and requiring more of it in the energy sector. So certainly that's something the MEA supports, and something we'd like to promote throughout our membership, the opportunities to get more diverse communities involved in the energy sector. I think, that could be a possibility through some of the programs that are currently being created in in Nova Scotia. They will create job opportunities. And I think that, I know in my previous role, we worked with First Nations communities and often did training programs and such to bring them into work on the project specifically. So made sure that they had the training and the requirements to do that. And I think that that's, definitely a possibility to come out of some of the projects that will be constructed in Nova Scotia in the coming years. I think the MEA's role predominantly in this is to provide information. We aren't just an association for our members. I mean, obviously they're our focus, but we do provide a lot of free content that anyone is welcome to join in on. You can visit our website at www.maritimsenergy.com. But I think having that information available goes a long ways towards leveling the playing field for diverse communities in Nova Scotia.
Thanks all. So I'm going to skip now to, I'll try to find some, relevant questions or good questions that we can actually answer from the panel, from the attendees. So this one's kind of general, and maybe we'll go in reverse order this time, Jennifer, Derek, then Peter. There are so many exciting initiatives underway in Nova Scotia. What do the panelists see as the hurdles preventing us from doing better, moving faster, transforming fairly and justly, but importantly, quicker and more effectively?
Yeah, I don't have the benefit of hearing Peter and Derek's response before I go this time. I think for me, I think, I don't want my past history here with government is sort of top of mind. I think government has created a lot of great policies, Nova Scotia government in this case. I think just the nature of the beast, it tends to be a bit slow going through the processes. For instance, the MOU with the federal government came in August of 2019 to power their facilities with renewable energy. We're just getting around to that now. I mean, I know COVID's taken a huge hit out of that as well. But I think really trying to be as efficient and streamlining the processes around these things are probably the best way to go in terms of speeding up the timelines. I think, also just the public, the pressure from the public goes a long way. I mean, we're hearing so much more about ESG these days than we have in the future. And I think the more you have the public changing their minds on what they want, the faster governments are going to be able to react to that.
Yeah, just to build on that, I also think government can play a really important role. I mean, often we feel government moves slowly and they're bureaucratic. I mean, we've seen through the pandemic that government can move with lightning speed when there is a sense of urgency and it's really important. And so I think government plays a really important role to develop the policies and the regulations and the programs. So collectively, kind of all of the carrots and sticks that we're going to need to move people. So for sure, the private sector plays a big role too, but government does play a big role in helping create the enabling conditions that enable the private sector to move quickly. And just to use hydrogen as an example, granted, there has been a lot of discussion about hydrogen here until the last couple of years, but there aren't any policies or regulations or programs to address that. So I think that's going to be key. I think one of the other big keys will be for policies and regulations to be established at the energy system level, which we also don't have yet. We have electricity policies and regulations. There's gas policies and regulations. There's gasoline policies and regulations. We don't have energy systems policies and regulations, and I think we're going to need that. I mean, frankly, as I talked about, we think it's going to be critically important for the electric utility and the gas utility to work together. And I think government has a role to play to kind of help create the environment and the conditions to allow that to happen.
Yeah, I'll jump in. Agree with everything my colleagues said. I think, what are the hurdles? I think 2030, which we've stated as our ambition to get off coal, that actually is very, very fast. I feel the sense of urgency every day when I wake up. So I think we are moving fast to do that. But the hurdles there, it's interesting when I think about that, because often you'd think there'd be technological hurdles to it. But I think in our plan to transition off coal, it's not really a technological problem. It's going to be a combination of transmission, renewables, storage, and a few other pieces of it that are going to get us there. But we can do that. I think where the hurdles come in is sort of in the complexity of the entire plan. It involves multiple jurisdictions. So, we're looking at more of a regional plan when we think about the Atlantic Loop. So multiple provincial governments plus a federal government, multiple utilities, multiple regulators, that kind of thing. There's the complexity of that, of multiple jurisdiction and multiple players that I think presents a hurdle. But I think while it's complex and lots of moving parts, I still have confidence that the 2030 can be achieved.
Okay, thanks everyone. So I'm going to try to run through some of the questions and find one for you guys individually. Maybe summarize a little bit what I'm reading in here, but this one's for Peter. I mean, can you comment a bit, if you can, about where you see the landscape for independent power producers in the next little while, with some of the policy elements that are in play now when we're talking about potentially green choice and shared solar?
Yeah, well, I think if renewables are going to be procured in the province like they have been in the past, it's going to be through competitive RFP. And I think we've seen declining costs for renewables in other procurements in other parts of Canada and indeed North America. And I think there's certainly cost-effective resources out there. So I think really what it comes down to, we as Nova Scotia Power, we would very dearly like to build, own those renewables. We know others do as well. But I think what it comes down to is a couple things. One, I mentioned affordability a lot in my remarks, and I think being able to be price competitive and deliver those that value on to our customers is going to be key. And so if IPPs can provide for that, then that's good. It's good savings for our customers. But I think the other thing too is I put out there, I talked a lot about collaboration and partnerships in my comments too. And so we are interested in actively partnering and collaborating on this transition. So if anybody does want to chat about that, I'm available.
Great, thanks, Peter. This one's for Derek. Considering that hydrogen is only green when it's produced using renewable electricity, and looking ahead to 2030, we still expect to be 20% short of supplying 100% of our primary electricity needs using renewables. When do we expect to have enough extra renewable electricity to produce a significant amount of green hydrogen?
Wow, that's as much a question for Peter as for me, but I will take a crack at it. And Peter, feel free to jump in. So one of the interesting opportunities that we see with green hydrogen is the opportunity to put more wind generation onto the electric grid, knowing that we will be able to utilize that renewable electricity 24/7 and 365 days of the year. And because one of the challenges now is, we can put more wind onto the grid, but at some times a year, we actually have more wind generating capacity than we need. And so hydrogen can play an important role there. So you think about, at the, when you're driving from, well, back in the days when you could drive from Nova Scotia to New Brunswick, and you'd see, the big wind farm in Amherst, and often on a sunny day, those wind turbines aren't going around, even though the wind is blowing, because we don't need that capacity. Well, that's a terrific opportunity to use that surplus renewable electricity to produce green hydrogen and then store it. So, this is again where integration of the energy systems becomes so critical, so that we're not only looking at our energy system by type, but we're really looking at it at a full system level. Likewise with solar energy. We are have an energy system that peaks in the winter. Solar is not a great integrator for that. Solar makes a lot of sense in Florida or Arizona or California, where their electric grid peaks in the summer, coincident when lots of solar is available. But hydrogen provides the opportunity for us to put more solar panels in the province, knowing that even in the summer, when we may not need that electricity in the electric grid, we can be using it to produce hydrogen that we can then deploy in the following winter.
Thanks, Derek. Jennifer, this one's for you. I mean, there's a few questions here that are related to the eye-opening release of the International Energy Association's Net Zero report. Just wondering, what's the discussion at MIA amongst the members about this? Anything that you'd like to add about it?
I honestly haven't had a lot of feedback from our members on that specific report, but we do talk a lot about what this transition means for our members, how they, and as I'm sure most of the folks on the line now, we're predominantly made up of supply chain members, and so they've traditionally worked in the oil and gas sector, but they are well trained, particularly in the offshore world, the dangers of working in open water, this health and safety aspects of doing that type of work, and that can be easily applied to offshore wind, for example. And so I think it's working with them to take the skills and these stuff that they're really good at. And I'm sure there's a more elegant way of saying that, taking that knowledge that they have and applying it to the renewable field. So we're trying to highlight opportunities for them to do that, and where they can become involved and perhaps transition or diversify their offerings to not only meet the needs of oil and gas companies, but to work with renewable companies as well.
Thanks, Jennifer. Peter, this one's for you. Sort of on the question of EVs and who needs to lead the charge. Pardon the pun, but who needs to lead the charge on the charging stations? Clearly, if we want to have more electric vehicles out there, we need a whole lot more chargers.
Yeah, it's a great question. It's something I've been very focused on here. It's probably, I can give my answer for that. And that it's that I'd like to see us as a utility play more of a role in that, frankly, because we already have existing distribution infrastructure across the province that we can tap into. I think provide that cost effectively, but to be able to do that. Would require us to discuss with our regulator the ability to do that. I think before my time there was an attempt at that. It didn't go so well. But when I look around, I've haven't had an opportunity to drive around too much because of the restrictions from COVID. But in the fall, I got out around the province and was in an EV and felt a bit of that anxiety, that range anxiety, because the EV chargers were few and far between. So, when I think of what the car manufacturers are doing and how fast they're transitioning to EVs, I think about, the jurisdiction of Nova Scotia. I think we're well suited to have EVs here in terms of the average trip length. So I think it's a great jurisdiction for that, but we've got to make sure we've got the proper infrastructure in place, and we dearly love to play a role in advancing that.
Thanks, Peter. Derek, I'll see if I can distill this one a bit for you. But so with such a fast push towards decarbonization and lower emissions, how do you see heritage gas competing with electricity, especially when the cost of solar and wind is dropping significantly? Do you think current gas customers will be willing to pay more for hydrogen or be patient enough to wait for the system to be rolled out? So I think it's just essentially it's a question of cost to the consumer on that technology for you.
Great question. So today, the price of green hydrogen, depending on the scale that is produced, might be $7 a kilogram or so. So say roughly $50 per gigajoule. So 5 or 6 times the current cost of natural gas. but the costs are projected to come down rapidly, just like we've seen with wind and solar over the last 20 years. In fact, just last week, the US government announced an initiative that set a target to reduce the cost of green hydrogen by 80% within a decade, so by 2030. And that would reduce the cost of green hydrogen to about $9 Canadian per gigajoule. So about the same price as fossil natural gas in the province today. And that's about 3 cents a kilowatt hour. So, we're maybe less than a decade away of having green hydrogen be as cheap as wind energy is today. So again, sometimes it's hard to imagine, but likewise, if we looked at the price of wind or solar 20 years ago, we never could have imagined that it's as low as it is today. And I think when you look at the projections, every projection of the forward price of wind and solar has been wrong. The actual price has been even lower. So, technology, industry, they can do great things when they put their mind to it. And we think that hydrogen, given its importance globally to help us get to net zero, is going to be on that type of cost curve.
Thanks, Derek. Okay, so I'm reading through some of the questions, and they're pretty direct and technical. And so I'm going to move to something that it always reminds me that we're talking about a lot of things that impact all citizens. So as we move forward to a future that is grounded in renewable energy, how do we engage with other stakeholders within the community to create awareness and enable all Nova Scotians to create like behavior change? But essentially, how do we meet people in the communities where they are at around these big changes that are going to happen pretty rapidly over the next decade? Peter, you can start, and I think I'll ask everybody to comment on this one.
Sure. I think, we're actively engaged in doing that. So I think it's multi-pronged. Part of what I've been doing over the last few weeks has been meeting with community leaders to start those discussions. So certainly in HRM, also CBRM and other jurisdictions. And really the focus there has been partially on where we do have coal plants, having discussions with those communities about our plans, what that means, what the potential local impacts are going to be, but then also talking about opportunities. So we've engaged in great discussions with many of these communities around their own, we heard about Halifax today, but even the smaller communities have ambitious climate change goals as well. And so engaging with those communities around what their ambitions are, how do we work together to help deliver on those ambitions? And those ambitions are informed by what their own citizens want, desire, and are telling their politicians. So that's an important touch point. We're also actively engaged in, we have the pleasure of serving the entire province and having a customer relationship with everybody in the province of Nova Scotia. And so, it gives us an opportunity to engage with our customers through multiple channels to talk about what our plans are, to hear what their interests are, what their concerns might be, and really keep that dialogue going. So, it's a constant story. It's really about engagement and two-way information flow. So we've got to both listen and speak, and we're fully committed to that.
So I'll jump in. I'll say, it can be really daunting because it's easy for even Canada to say, we can't do a whole lot to get to net zero because we're such a small part of the whole global energy system, and that can be said at a provincial level. So then it's not surprising that an individual homeowner says, well, what can I possibly do that's going to have an impact? But I think what's critical is we all do have a role to play. I've been working with Shannon Miedema and her team at HRM on sort of implementing the Halifax 2050 Climate Action Plan. And one of the really interesting projects we've been involved in is what's called the Gigaton Challenge. And it's really on a big scale. It's looking at ways to reduce global emissions by 1 gigaton, so a massive amount. But the way we develop the training is, say, can we reduce emissions by 1 ton in 1 month? And then you start to get down to the scale that you can actually find some really interesting ideas to be able to do that, and then say, how do we scale that up? So I think that there are things that every homeowner can do. I mean, one thing we have not talked at all about really is energy efficiency, which can play a huge role. Like if we use 169 petajoules of energy today, if our energy use is going to go up 1 or 2% a year, getting to net zero is going to be much more challenging than if we're reducing our energy use by 1 or 2 or 3% a year. And when it comes to energy efficiency, everyone can do things there, whether it's putting in a heat pump or buying an electric vehicle, or for most homeowners, the most impactful thing they can do to reduce their energy use is to make their home more energy efficient. And one of the challenges, though, is it's a big upfront capital cost. So to do a deep energy retrofit on your home, it might cost $40,000 or $50,000. Many homeowners do not have access to that amount of capital, and unfortunately, the homeowners who would benefit the most are the ones who are least able to afford it. So, to have government and utilities providing the energy efficiency programs and the tools and the financing that homeowners need to be able to take those actions, I think are going to be really important. Because I think the math will show that Nova Scotia can't get to net zero unless, by far the majority of our existing building stock is far more energy efficient than it is today.
I think just jump in there, Derek, unless you had a little bit more you wanted to add. I think from our perspective at the association, I mean, one of our goals is to inform and educate the public. So certainly there's more that we could be doing on that front. But I also, I believe Peter said it's a multi-pronged approach, and I absolutely completely agree with that. I think the onus is also on developers to be out there in their communities where they want to be putting projects and having those conversations early and often, and being very upfront about their plans. I think that goes a long way to creating community acceptance. I also think the other thing that maybe Canada's a little bit behind the times on is including education on energy in the curriculum for schools. I think school children are absolutely open to all of these messages. I know I have a 17-year-old daughter, and we talk a lot about climate change and the impact that it's having on our environment and what we can do as individuals and as citizens to try and curb some of the damage that's been done. And I think, if educating our youth is going to be, they're the next generation, they're going to be the ones that deal with this fallout. And I think they're the best way to get the message out. So that would be my thought on that.
Great. Here's another one for all three, just quick hit. I'm glad you mentioned energy efficiency and energy poverty, Derek, but, because I think we see business opportunity there. Like, what advice would you guys have for entrepreneurs right now? Maybe start with Jennifer, Derek, Peter.
So not really, my entrepreneurs aren't really something I know a ton about. I wish I had some of that spirit myself, but I think that I'm not sure if this is going to completely answer your question, but I think one of the things that kind of goes hand in hand with getting more people involved is also giving them the incentives to see what the impact their actions can have. So smart meters, I think, are great from that perspective, looking to see how much energy you're actually using and finding ways to conserve that energy, and then seeing how much you saved highlighted on the bottom of your bill would be great. But I think also, I mean, there's tons of new products coming out all the time to give homeowners more control over their energy usage. I know, I have an Ecobee thermostat, and I'm not being paid by them. I have an Ecobee thermostat, and I understand it's a Canadian company, and it's amazing. I mean, it's totally changed the way I use energy in my own house, and I'm being far more efficient with its use. So I think, I'm not sure that that's an easy take for an entrepreneur to just come up with an app that's going to help our energy consumption behaviors. But I think that for sure, I think that's what will get more homeowners to be part of the solution, is seeing the savings they can realize.
In terms of what entrepreneurs can do, we often think of sort of innovation from a technological standpoint, but financing innovation, I think, is going to be maybe even more important, because I think, as Peter said, most of the technologies we need to get to net zero exist today or or are in development. The challenge is how are average homeowners going to afford these things? So for example, there is a very innovative company. I won't even call them a startup now because they're growing so rapidly in the US. The company is called Sealed. And what Sealed does is it goes into a home, does essentially a very thorough energy audit, identifies all of the opportunities to reduce energy costs in that home. The homeowner pays no money upfront. Sealed invests all of the money required to improve the energy efficiency of that home, and then structures a repayment package that enables the homeowner to repay the loan out of the money they save on their energy. So for the homeowner, they pay no money up front. So, you know, in terms of addressing energy poverty, it's a great way to do it. The repayment happens on the timeline that the cash flow saving will allow. And then once the money's been paid back, then the homeowner benefits from those savings for as long as they live in that home. So those kinds of innovations, I think, are going to be really important.
Maybe what I'd add is that I think, you know, where entrepreneurs really play traditionally is figuring out ways to create value, right? And I think that's really what this is all about in this transition is what is that value to the system, to the end use customer that can be brought by, you know, partnering, collaborating with others. Because I do think, as I said before, utility can be, you know, we own a lot of the infrastructure and we can be an enabler, we can be an accelerator for that change, but it's going to take a bit of an ecosystem of providers that add value to really deliver on the promise. And so I think that's really where the entrepreneurs come in.
Great, thanks. So we're getting very close to the end of an engaging hour and a half. So how about I hand it around, Peter, Derek, Jennifer, for final thoughts before we call it a day.
Sure. Say thank you to everybody for your engagement today. I think, you know, we've been able to have a really good, positive discussion. I'm trying to think how I'd best sum it up. I think, you know, awareness is important. That's why I'm talking as much as I can about this. Engagement is important. Understanding the direction that we all know we've got to go in, and then finding opportunities where we can work together to successfully deliver on that. And ultimately, yeah, we all want green. We need to clean the grid, but we've got to do this affordably and equitably. That's the challenge for us. I think we can do it. I think doing it collaboratively is the way to go.
I think as well, there's a big economic growth opportunity here. You know, if Nova Scotia pursues a path to net zero that continues to rely on us importing most of our energy, the economic growth opportunities here may be somewhat limited. But you know, think of all of the Nova Scotians who are, you know, skilled tradespeople who have moved to Alberta to work in the energy industry there. If we pursue a renewable energy path that is producing renewable energy here in the province, there's an opportunity to attract Nova Scotians back home and to generate all of the economic impact of that here within the province. So I think, you know, we really kind of determining the right pathway to get to net zero is one thing. But then determining the pathway that also provides the most economic opportunities for us here in the province is going to be really important too.
I think from my perspective, I'm, you know, with every challenge comes an opportunity, and I'm excited about the opportunities that you know, renewables, adding more renewables brings to Nova Scotia. Like Derek mentioned, there's jobs and economic development opportunities. Perhaps entrepreneurs will figure out the opportunities that I'm unable to in the energy efficiency space. But I do think that there is a lot to look forward to. I think Nova Scotia has always been has a reputation of being very forward thinking on the environment. And I think this is more evidence of that. And I'm excited to see where this goes.
Awesome. Thank you so much, panelists. Like, I think we've all been really lucky to have you guys here today for an hour and a half. Thank you to the Patrick and the Chamber staff for putting this together, and Mayor, thank you for opening us up. I think we're like ending right on the dot of 2:30. Amazing.
Well
This,
done.
like I said, this is it's unfair to try to cover this much ground in an hour and a half. These are really complex topics, and I think you guys did a wonderful job. And for those who put questions in the chat, in the Q&A that I didn't get to, I apologize for that. I think there's ways to follow up with the individual organizations to get those answers, because they were all very good questions.
That's great, Scott. Thank you very much. I'm just going to be the wrapper-upper here. So thank you very much, Scott, Peter, Jennifer, and Derek, for your thoughts today. Excuse me. And thank you to our audience. Sorry, I'm pointing at my monitor. Thank you to our audience for the thought-provoking questions, and a lot of them, which is great. And clearly, folks who know a lot more about every part of this than I do. I will say I did my little bit this weekend, and I replaced 32 incandescent light bulbs with LED because I moved to a smaller home. So I have saved lots of money, although probably cost Nova Scotia Power some money, but I think Peter's okay.
It's the right thing to do, Patrick.
Okay, perfect. So lots of wattage saved there. So we are leaders in Nova Scotia in the energy revolution, thanks to the organizations we heard from today. And I'd like to again thank our sponsors for supporting today's important conversation: Nova Scotia Power, Heritage Gas, Dalhousie University Rose School of Business, and the Printing House. Thanks everyone for attending today. We'll see you again soon, and this will be recorded so you can watch it again or send it to your friends. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye now.